Good afternoon. The Maricopa Continuum of Care Board meeting is now called to order. Just a reminder to turn on your microphone when speaking and mute when not speaking. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under the COC's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located at the information table and present it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Katie, please take roll call, and members of the board, please say you are here and your organization after Katie calls your name.
Thank you, Co-Chair Phillips. Jessica Cruz is here. She is with Native American Connections. Liz DaCosta. Lisa Glow. Here. Lisa, can you share your organization, please?
With Cass.
Thank you. Chris Hallett.
Here with the city of Peoria.
Thank you. Michael Hughes.
Here, a new leaf.
Thank you. Natalie Lewis. Sean Pierce.
Sean Pierce, Maricopa County.
Thank you. Charles Sullivan.
Charles Sullivan, ABC Housing.
Thank you. Sienna Valdez. Cricket Weatherington.
Here, Arizona Housing, Inc.
Thank you. Danielle Wright.
Here, Arizona Coalition and Sexual and Domestic Violence.
Thank you. Co-Chair Rachel Milne.
Here, City of Phoenix.
Co-Chair Vicki Phillips.
Here, Community Bridges.
That you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is call to audience. The next item on the agenda is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the Continuum of Care Board that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Katie, were there any comments received or anyone who wishes to offer comments at this time?
There were no public comments received and no one to offer public comment at this time.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the next agenda item. Our next agenda item is the approval of the consent agenda. Items 3A through 3H are on the agenda for consent. Does any member of the board have questions, comments, or request a presentation of any of these items? Okay. Does any member of the public wish to comment on any items on the consent agenda? Right. May I have a motion to approve the consent items 3A through 3H?
So
Sorry.
this is Chris.
Chris, may I have a second?
Charles, all second.
Thank you. Chris and Charles. Is there discussion of the motion from the board or comments from the public? All right. We'll now take a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
Yeah.
Those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes. We will move on to the next agenda item. All right, membership opening. Each year in August, we open membership recruitment for open seats on the COC board. We currently have up to 5 open seats. These seats include 1 advocacy seat, 2 non-municipal seats, or 2 non-municipal funder seats, and 2 community seats. We'd like to vote to open up membership for these seats to close on Friday, September 15th at 5 p.m. Are there any comments or discussion from the board? No? Okay. May I have a motion to approve opening membership?
So moved. This is Sean.
Thank you, Sean. May I have a second?
Seconded, Lisa Glow.
Lisa, thank you. All right, we'll now take a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, please say nay. Thank you. The motion passes. We also need volunteers to participate in the membership work group, which will meet the week of September 18th virtually. May I please have some volunteers who are willing to participate?
I'll volunteer.
Rachel
I can too.
and Cricket. One more individual. Rachel, Cricket, and Mike all volunteer. Thank you very much. Katie will work with you and schedule some time. All right. Next item is the homeless trends report. Katie will provide an overview of the homeless trends report and top takeaways from the report for Q2. Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Phillips. As Displayed on your screen, this is the homelessness trends report for April through June 2023. The first page really documents the actively number of people experiencing homelessness. So we've continued to see a rise of not only households, but people experiencing homelessness within those households, with this in June being just over 8,400 individual clients. We're continuing to see that rise kind of in since kind of earlier this year. We didn't see that traditional peak in the summer. We're seeing just that kind of consistency. Under new to system, we're seeing kind of that average of being 1,100-ish clients per year in that new to system. So those are going to be people who are coming new to the homeless response system who have not been seen in HMIS over the last 2 years. We did see a pretty high peak in March, but now tapering down throughout the summer. And then opposite that positive exits, we're seeing just that kind of tapering, a little bit of an increase month over month, but a little bit concerning, as we know, kind of starting in July, we are seeing some funding drop off when it comes to housing. So definitely something to keep an eye on, specifically next quarter. You even saw that dip down to 88 in number of exits to housing specifically. Moving on to page 2, you'll see very similarly to what we've seen in previous, we still have an overrepresentation of people of color, about equal numbers that we're seeing in that male to female breakdown ratio, staying with that 60 to 40% split, with more males showing up. And then as you continue to scroll down, again, seeing the same number of older adults. This is based off of head of households. Tyler, if you'll scroll down just a little bit further, we see the biggest population being that 25 to 61. These are based off of head of households, though, so we know kids are overrepresented, which we'll see on the following page. You'll again see that comparison to census data comparatively to our HMIS data. Looking at subpopulations, we've seen a pretty kind of consistent story with families that we've been seeing over the last year, with a slight dip. We are seeing more folks in families. So in June, it was 2,441 people. So definitely a lot of kids that we're seeing in the system for that 636 families. If you keep going through the rest of these subpopulations, for older adults, youth, and veterans, we're seeing that stagnant with a slight increase kind of across all 3 populations. Nothing other than our continuing tight housing market that is driving those numbers. And then lastly, we're seeing a little bit of a dip down under our chronically homeless based off of that peak that we saw earlier this year in March. So definitely something to still keep an eye on as well. We have more people experiencing chronic homelessness than we have seen in our system in years. Lastly, want to highlight, this was a change in our last quarterly trends report. We have an interactive dashboard for our system performance measures. Really do recommend that you look at those, as well as on that page is a link to our program performance measures, which you all passed in July. So link right there to the PDF that highlights all of those. Moving to the last page, you'll see a slightly different, one of the far left is a new number added to the quarterly trends report. This is really looking at the number of people who are coming through the system, both in emergency shelter, transitional housing, and safe havens. So really wanted to highlight the pure number of people coming through our system of over 28,000 unique individuals. And so at any one time, we have 8,000 folks, but we know that those are different people all of the time. And so we'll continue to update this and keep it updated on our quarterly trends report. That middle is similarly to what you see. So that's going to be a point in time, clients served. And so that's going to be on the first of the month, how many people were served there. And then lastly, our 2 new projects that opened over the course of the last few months. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Co-Chair, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Does any member of the board have any questions or comments? Are there any comments from the public? All right.
Sorry. One additional thing, this has now been updated on the website, as well as some common takeaways. So each quarter, we've been working with the communications work group to create top takeaways from the report, really highlighting that total number of people being served, how many people are coming in. You've heard me repeatedly say that we have X number of people coming into the system for every 10 we are housing. For this report, we're at 19 people coming in for every 10 people getting housing. So close to double the amount of new people coming in versus housing, which you'll see based off of that new to system and positive exits. But those are kind of some top takeaways from the report that are highlighted on the page before you even get into the report.
Question. I mean, I hear you and I look at the numbers, but yet it shows the households actively homeless went down.
The biggest reason may be that people are not engaging in the system, or we just don't know that they left. So as far as positive exits go, they have to tell us, like, I went and stayed with mom, or I went and found housing on my own. We do have still quite a few folks that exit to an unknown destination. About 3/4 of our exits are to unknown destinations. So those folks may not be engaging in the system and they may have found a positive exit. We just don't know that.
Do we track that? I mean, it seems to me you'd want to kind of track the whole population, whether they're engaged or not, and then those that are engaged are just, because it can be deceiving. Oh, it's going down, but it's really just they're not engaged. Is that what I'm hearing? The reason the number went down is more become less engaged. And so the ones that are engaged, I just think it sends a false positive, if you ask me.
This is a lot of what your next item on the agenda is about, your 30 versus 90-day engagement. We do have folks that leave and maybe never come back and never let us know that they are leaving the system, but hoping to also start to understand who are those folks that are not engaging with the system and why they're not engaging.
Katie, this is Michael. And along with what Chris is saying, how is it being communicated? When you throw out a statistic that for every 10 we're helping, 19 more are coming in, that's an incredible statistic or finding. Are the powers to be realizing that we are doing everything we can at the same time? It's for lack of a better way of saying it, it's an uphill battle.
Yes, I just presented last week at Regional Council, and I think I received more comments than I've ever received on a presentation about homelessness, and a lot of really good discussion about the challenges and why those challenges are happening. And a lot of it is discussion about lack of housing that is available and places to move into. We had a quite lengthy discussion about economics, because a lot of it is an economic factor in how folks are. Even though we have a really strong economy, we have a lack of affordable housing and a lack of employment that is paying the rate that we need to be paying in order to stop folks from entering homelessness. And so that same statistic was in my presentation to them last week, and spent quite a bit of time kind of breaking that down and what did that mean for our system.
Thank you.
This is Chris again, just to follow up on Mike. I mean, a very good point, how we message that, how we use our data, absolute data, so we can, obviously prevention is lacking if we're having more entries into homelessness than exits. Certainly we know there's upstream, we don't have enough permanent, supportive and affordable, but if we can prevent them from becoming homeless beginning, there's some efforts. I think it's a continuum, since what we do is very refined. And I think we had a very robust discussion last month on the merits of our NOFA and everything else, but I really think the power of this board is beyond that. And how we message the information we have access to, how do we influence the regional council? Many of us have to deal with our own council and motivate them to invest in the infrastructure, the nonprofit, everything that we all know so well. Had some really robust conversations last week at the conference too. We got to use this to, promote the needs, which is both prevention and obviously more affordable. It's not, everybody tends to really get hyper focused on the shelter and the day you stay, but if they aren't going to go where that date just keeps creeping up, doesn't matter what our goal is, because you got 19 coming in, 10, I mean, it's all math, right? And I think we could use that to help with that campaign, which honestly, I don't think speaks to what's really going on out there as much as we probably could directly or in conjunction with that. Just my 2 cents.
Hi, I want to weigh in briefly too, because that is pretty alarming. And I think the messaging is critical at the council level, at the county level, and at the state level, because if we're going to be able to get the state to continue to invest like they did last year, we've got to bring this kind of compelling information to them, that it's the upstream, it's also the fall off on the housing subsidies that Katie was referring to, and the lack of housing. So this data is gold. I always use it in varying things. So Katie, good job at all of this. But I agree, we need to figure out how to message it. How can we leverage it between city councils? Are they willing to go lobby at the state level? Because we have this unprecedented one-time funding. It shouldn't be one-time funding.
Thank you, Chris, Mike, and Lisa. Appreciate the comments, feedback. Next item up, we're going to talk about the 30 versus 90-day activity policy, and I'm going to be turning it back over to Katie to provide an overview of the 30 versus 90-day activity policy and how changing the policy impacts our work.
So there is a memo included in your packet, but I want to give you a brief overview as to like what this means and then what the options are and what the recommendations are from your committees. Right now for both your system flow dashboard and your by name list, which is how people get referred into housing through coordinated entry, you currently use what is called a 30-day activity policy for outreach. So that means your outreach teams have to engage with someone experiencing homelessness every 30 days to keep them both on your system flow dashboard, which ultimately becomes your homelessness trends report, and on your by name list to get them referred into housing. So this is just specifically related to folks who are engaging with outreach. If you are staying in a shelter or engaged with a coordinated entry access point, you have to have done that in the last 7 days to be active on your by name list and your system flow dashboard. So if you are staying in shelter, you are actively getting on those two lists. So next slide. Currently, you have a 30-day policy for both. So one of your options is you can stay as is and do a 30-day by name list policy and a 30-day system flow dashboard policy for those folks engaged in outreach. The pros of this option are that you have folks who, everybody who is at the top of your by name list has been engaged with somebody in the last 30 days, so it is easier for them to find them. The cons is somebody who does not engage, who, for example, is staying out in the river bottom, or maybe does not want to engage with services on an ongoing basis, or does not let us know that if I went out to them and they didn't give me their name or anything about them as an outreach worker, I cannot necessarily engage with them and record that in the homeless management information system. So you may be missing folks who are engaging, but not necessarily, or who are ready to go into housing, but not necessarily engaging in the system. Next slide. Your second option is to go to a 30-day by name list, 90-day system flow dashboard. This would shift your system flow dashboard from 30 days to 90 days for folks that are engaged with outreach. This would be consistent with your current outreach policies. So if as an outreach worker, if you do not see somebody for 90 days, that's when you're supposed to close them out. You're supposed to continue to work with them, look for them for up to 90 days. And then at that point, you would close them out. This would raise your overall numbers to show volumes higher than the annual point in time count. Right now, you're just below the annual point in time count, even though it's over the course of a month, versus point in time count is 1 day. It would reduce your data fluctuations. So kind of what we were just talking about with Chris, those folks who are, they are leaving the system to an unknown destination. Often those folks are returning from inactive in a following month or 2 months or 3 months. This would reduce that kind of back and forth. However, if you choose option 2, you would have the by name list and the system flow dashboard would no longer match. Currently they do at 30 and 30. This would change it to 30 and 90. The upside to this is that you are going to show a more reflective numbers in your system flow dashboard. The cons of this is your data systems no longer match for your by name list and your system flow dashboard. Next slide. Your last option is very similar to your second option, except this would change to a 90-day by name list and a 90-day system flow dashboard. It would do all the things that I just mentioned on option 2. However, it would also increase your by name list length and would reduce the folks that are only engaged with outreach will stay on those. And those are also the folks that oftentimes on a week by week by name list we found them this week, an outreach team is trying to get them into housing, and then we can't actually refer them because they're not on the by name list at the top of our list. So it would create a lot more consistency on people who are really vulnerable and need housing to stay on the list longer. However, that also means that our by name list is going to get longer. Next slide. The recommendation from both your coordinated entry committee and your data committee is to adopt a 90-day, so option 3. But wanted to open it up to you all to see if you had any questions or feedback.
Katie, can I go? Okay. I thought maybe Vicki was gonna go. I have 2 questions. The first one is something that's mattered to me for a long time, from both like when I was at United Way as well as where I'm at now. It affects what we're doing. Do we have any data to know like is there a magic number, some cliff point when they fall off and don't come back on? And does this align with that? That's the first question.
So when we did a deep dive analysis, one of the challenging part is every time we do an analysis, it is an all manual process. So you do see a bell curve of the drop off is after that 90-day activity. So it does drop pretty significantly after that, but it is a little bit as you get over that 90-day hump, then this next hump is like significantly smaller, but then you're shifting and that's the next hump. So you could keep expanding and expanding.
Okay.
But 90 days is that kind of cliff that we see that drop off, which is why we're recommending kind of that alignment. A lot of that also has to do with a lot of the folks who after their, it could be 2 things. An outreach team is no longer looking for them and trying to engage with them. So if I'm working with Vicki as my client, I'm looking for her. I may just not see her in that 30-day timeframe. I'm still looking for her until she's closed and no longer on my caseload. So it could also be that once they're closed off your caseload, it could be because our outreach policies are 90 days. But that is also best practice across the country. The other deep dive that we did was looking at our by name list and seeing how much this change would impact our like flow back and forth. And it increased our total flow by 2,000, but reduced our back and forth by 40%. So there's a lot of folks that were just kind of back and forth and back and forth. This reduced those numbers that were back and forth.
So then my second question, and this is going back to just for your context of my question, back to rapid rehousing for singles, and how many times people would get like 50 referrals and not be able to find any of them, and the amount of time people were out searching for people. So like, what's the plan? Because that was a nightmare, and then we were at 30 days for that.
So the other recommendation, and thank you for saying that, Cricket, is adding to the by name list what was the day of activity that we last saw them, so that we know, like, if somebody has not seen them they have not engaged with the system for 88 days, then like how long should that referral be considered open, and should we be making that referral as consistently if we have not seen them in a long time, and knowing that that may be a problem when we submit that referral over. And then I think in practice, one of the things that we've been working with the HSC team on is how do we make that better connection based off of the team that has, like, do you think this person should really still be open in your outreach program, or should you actually be closing them? Because our policy says that you should keep them open for 90 days, but if you have not seen them, you should be closing them down sooner than that. If you know maybe they were going to stay with their uncle in Florida. And so I think it's kind of a both and of adding this data element to the by name list, but in practice, what does this look like? And we're still kind of working through that.
So my last question was not of my 2, this is my now 3rd one. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. What do we have to like come back and say, this is the impact at, like, when can we get reports back so that we can reevaluate if this was the right way to go, or if it's creating system issues?
I think we'll be able to evaluate that in 3 months. However, I will also say your next agenda item is the coordinated entry evaluation update. And so that may have a different level of impact. So it may be that 3 months may be a little bit jaded, given that we are also making that change simultaneously or within that 3-month timeframe.
Just quick questions, Chris, to clarify if you asked what I thought you asked. So I would always hear that somebody would fall off after 30 days and they have to get back in line. Is that the 30-day versus the 90-day on the by name list, and any referrals or resources? And
Yeah, so if you are not engaged in the system, as soon as you re-engage, you retake your spot as to wherever your vulnerability is. So if you're not engaging in the system, say you were number 5 on the list and then you didn't engage, you would just fall off the list. And then when you came back and re-engaged, now maybe you could be 2 or you could be 8, depending on where your vulnerability falls comparatively to everybody else on the list. So this would change for only folks engaged in outreach only. This would move those folks from a 30-day engagement timeframe to a 90-day engagement timeframe.
they wouldn't fall off till after 90 days?
Correct.
All right.
And technically, I'm going to get very technical. It's like 96 days could be your absolute, because we produce it on a 1-week basis. So it's 90 days after the last list was produced.
All right. May I have a motion to approve a change in outreach activity policy from 30 days to 90 days for the by name list and system flow dashboard?
This is Chris, so moved.
May I have a second?
This is Jessica Cruz.
Jessica, second from Jessica. Thank you, Chris and Jessica. Is there discussion of the motion from the board or comments from the public?
So I just want to make sure this is to move it to option 3.
Thank you. Right, we will now take a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, please say nay. Thank you. We will work with the committees and HMIS on the implementation. All right, next item up, coordinated entry update. I'm going to turn it back over to Katie to provide an overview on the work completed since a coordinated entry evaluation and what's to come. Take it away, Katie.
Thank you. Next slide. So I wanted to give you all an overview of kind of all things coordinated entry update. I know you all are very interested on the VI SPDAT conversation, but there's a lot of other things that have been happening too. So I wanted to quickly go through some of the activities that we've done since the coordinated entry evaluation was released in March of this year. We worked with the coordinated entry leads to map access points. So we worked in tandem with our analytics team to really understand where our access points actually operating throughout the region. And then based off of that, we're now evaluating locations of access points and how to increase access points across the region and what makes sense to increase access points. We've specifically looked at also what access points tailor to what population. So for example, if an access point in the West Valley only tailors to veterans, then we need to be opening access points for folks that tailor to not just veterans and other folks like families and et cetera. We also launched the learning management system. If you have not registered, here's your plug to go register for the learning management system. Specifically, we've been rolling out a series of trainings on the assessment tool, currently the VI SPDAT diversion, and then client interaction tools. So we're continuing to add additional trainings to that. There's over 60 trainings right now and more to come. We monitored the coordinated entry leads. In your packet. You had a complete review of all of the monitoring that happened this year, including the coordinated entry access points. But really excited about the work that they've been doing and the work since that monitoring occurred in May. And then we've been doing a lot of coordination between the coordinated entry leads, HMIS, and MAG as the collaborative applicant. So mapping out kind of whose role is what, and really how do we better coordinate the 4 different agencies together. Next slide. As part of our monitoring, one of the goals specifically on the single side was increasing participation in case conferencing and really ensuring that everybody at the table understands what case conferencing is and isn't and who should be at the table. With that, we also made case conferencing less of this back and forth of where is my client on the list and more about what are we doing to actually case conference the clients that are coming to case conferencing. And so with that, we expanded access to the by name list through the homeless management information system. So folks just have to request access to the by name list. It's a limited list, so it just really says your client number and your rank, so you understand where your clients are on the list. And we are hoping that that will increase not only participation for folks that are at the top of the list, but also folks who are lower down on the list finding alternative solutions because they may not get a referral to housing. And so what are we doing to problem solve and case manage through some of those other those other client challenges. We launched an online grievance form through the COC. So this is on our website under the Need Help tab. Anybody can file a grievance through the continuum of care. We will follow up directly with the agency, even if it is not a COC funded program. So we've had everything from shelters to just interactions. And so we follow up with not only the client, but also with any programs that that is impacting. We standardized disability verification and homeless verification. You all had a standardized letter. However, not a lot of people are using these standardized letters. So made them fillable forms, fillable letters, and are really encouraging that if you are looking for a referral through coordinated entry, that you are using those specific letters so we know that they are on file. And then finally, we've been doing a ton of technical assistance and training in partnership with the coordinated entry leads. This will be continuing, but really kind of getting all of our ducks in a row, making sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, policies are being followed, all of that type of thing. Next slide. We launched a coordinated entry dashboard. Really excited about this. It just went live on Friday of last week. This is a snapshot of what the overview page looks like, but it really walks you through kind of every single step of coordinated entry and numbers related to those. I will send you all a link to this after the board meeting today. It is searchable through HMIS's Tableau, but coordinated entry has started using this to be reviewing numbers on an ongoing basis. It breaks down where every single person is throughout the process, which is really exciting as how are folks coming in and then walking through the process all the way to moving into housing. Next slide. There it is, 9-tab dashboard. Here is every step of the process. It goes through a resource overview. It also has all of our definitions and terminology similar to our other dashboards. Next slide. And then I know something you all have been waiting for is the assessment tool we've continued to meet. Next slide. So a little bit about the process. We have had a work group of 16 people who have been meeting since April. Your coordinated entry leads, 2 representatives from each coordinated entry lead, both singles and families. We had 1 representative from each of the different committees that are up there: coordinated entry, lived experience, race equity, and board. Charles was your representative from the board. You had funders represented, as well as subpopulation representatives. So older adults, youth, SMI population, veterans, domestic violence, all had a seat at the table. Next slide. We've had 7 meetings up to date. We went through an orientation of what to expect back in April, started talking about the criteria to prioritize and what does that look like, whether or not the group wanted to amend the VI SPDAT versus creating a new tool, and then started talking through the assessment questions versus data collected. So are we asking people a bunch of questions like the VI does, or can we use data from HMIS that we're already collecting? We ask people like 50 plus questions when they first interact with us. And really this group and you all have said, no, we should be more data driven and not ask some really invasive questions that we're not going to do anything with. So next slide. The decisions that have been made so far, so minimal questions to be asked. We really want this to be a data-driven result and really start to think about how we can move the work forward without asking all those invasive questions. And then we talked about what areas do we want to be prioritizing based off of. And these are the 7 areas that so far have are moving forward. So the first one being risk of remaining homeless. So that is asking questions like, what is your primary reason for homelessness? Have you been entered housing and then come back to homelessness? Have you stayed on our by name list a really long time? Or have you been on and off our list a bunch? So those folks that are engaging in outreach, but not necessarily engaging in our system. We've asked about health conditions. So folks with a disabling condition, as well as do they have 2 or more disabling conditions? Asking if folks, this is one of the questions we're asking is, are people regularly taking their medication and have access to that medication? The third one is high utilization of the homeless system. So our folks, we recently 90 or 5% of our people are using 95% of our resources. So can we start to identify those folks who are high utilizers of our system, having a lot of engagements over the course of a year, but have not yet moved into a housing resource? And then asking race and ethnicity questions, specifically proxy questions that are tailored towards this. So the 3 questions we are asking is, as a person of color, have you been discriminated against? Have you been engaged with the foster care system, or have your kids been engaged in the foster care system? And then the 3rd question is, have you been engaged with the criminal justice system? And then currently you guys prioritize based off of chronicity, so that do you have a disabling condition, and then that length of time homeless? A lot of our resources in the system are tailored to people who are chronically homeless. So if those folks are at the top of the list, it will be easier to identify the resource that is available for them. Length of time homeless, this is looking at points are based off of how long people have been experiencing homelessness based off of the top 5%, top 10%, and top 25%. So that's how those lengths change, and it is different for families versus singles based off of the self-reported time of length of homelessness. And then finally, we found that based off of this evaluation, there was some questions that really only tailored towards families. So the age of the children, if you have folks under 6 versus over 6, we found that folks that were under 6 were more vulnerable. The size of the family, so if you were a single parent with 3 or more kids, or if you were a dual adult household with 4 or more kids, you're more vulnerable than folks who had less kid to adult ratio. And then finally, if you are a family that is unsheltered, because we prioritize, we have a waiting list for families experiencing homelessness. Really, families that are unsheltered are more vulnerable than families who are in shelter already. Next slide. So some next steps with this, we are working on finalizing that tool. The next meeting is this Thursday at 4 p.m. We'll be working with the work group to finalize that tool and bring it back to you all. We are looking to identify referral decisions for rapid rehousing versus permanent supportive housing. Right now you have a break. If you score a 4 to 7 on the VI SPDAT, you get referred into rapid rehousing. If you score an 8 or more, you're getting referred into permanent supportive housing. Are we creating a new score split on the new prioritization tool, or are we doing referrals in a different way? If you're interested, come to the meeting on Thursday. We are working through an implementation plan for the pilot. So we are hoping to start this pilot. We are working with HMIS right now to determine all of the different changes to the tool. How can we get that implemented so that we can start reprioritizing a by name list based off of that? And then evaluating. We want to make sure that we are evaluating this new tool makes just as much sense, if not more sense. It is racially equitable. It is identity equitable, and that we are truly referring based off of what we want to. We feel like this is a tool that is really data driven, and there are a lot more value adds than the VI SPDAT, but we want to make sure that that is actually happening. So we'll be coming back with an evaluation plan. Before we even implement this pilot and evaluation plan, we will be bringing it to you all for approval, but want to kind of lay the land for next steps on that. And I think next slide, I am going to first ask Richard or Brian if you all have anything to add. Richard shaking his head no. Brian?
That was really concise and a very, very, very good overview. So nothing on my end.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you, Katie, Richard, Brian. Are there any comments or discussion from the board or public?
If I might, just a quick thank you to everyone who's on that committee who spent all this time. This is just incredible work. So, and a very time consuming, I can imagine. I wasn't on the group, but I think someone at the city was. So thank you very much to the group.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item.
Vicky, will this be included in the minutes? Like your overview, will that be included in the minutes when you follow? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, can I jump in real quick just about the presentation? I also just want to thank the City of Phoenix for funding this work. Without your funding, we would not have been able to do the assessment, contract with home base, and have the insight to be able to move forward with these recommendations. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next item up is a request for future agenda items. The next item is, do board members have any action or discussion items for future meetings? No? All right. I want to open the floor for a roundtable of announcements, events, challenges that you wish to address, or opportunities to come together for a new idea. Do any board members have any ideas or thoughts they would like to discuss?
I'd just like to, this is Michael Hughes. I'd like to mention to the group that it's been about 3 weeks now that we opened up 7 units in Surprise Family Homeless Shelter, and it's going well. And took us a while to get it going, but the city of Surprise has been great, and we're really excited about the progress that we've made.
I just wanted to congratulate you and also ask, the center there, is it open to the public as well? Or is it a walk-in center for the homeless?
Yes, but we're still trying to work out the bugs and get office space and figure out who can co-locate and things like that.
All right. With no further business, the meeting is now adjourned.
Quick plug from MAG staff. You all should have received the next board meeting, September 6th. This is an additional board meeting. It is at 9 a.m. It is to approve your priority listing for your notice of funding opportunity, which is due at the end of September. It is a hybrid meeting, but you are more than welcome to join virtually. The meeting is on your calendar from 9 to 10 a.m.
Now the meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you.